In the heart of a bustling city where skyscrapers pierced the clouds and dreams were both made and shattered, lived Maya, a young woman whose life was as far from glamorous as one could imagine. At just 24, she carried burdens that weighed heavier than the buckets of cleaning supplies she lugged around every day. Maya worked as a janitor at Sterling & Co., an elite corporate firm known for its polished marble floors, leather chairs, and the kind of people who seemed untouchable. To someone like her, she had been hired 6 months ago after losing her job at a diner when it shut down due to rising rent costs. Life hadn't given her much choice. She needed money to support herself and her younger brother, Marcus, who was studying engineering on a partial scholarship. Every morning, Maya woke up before sunrise, ate a quick breakfast of toast and peanut butter, and took 2 buses to reach work by 6 a.m. sharp. Her uniform, a plain gray jumpsuit with the company logo stitched onto the chest, was always clean but worn thin from countless washes. The other employees rarely acknowledged her presence. They walked past her without so much as a glance. Their expensive shoes clicking against the pristine floor, she scrubbed tirelessly. But there was one man who stood out among them all. Mr. Grayson, the vice president of operations, whose office sat on the top floor overlooking the entire city. He wasn't cruel in an overt way. He didn't yell or demean, but his subtle indifference cut deeper than any insult ever could. It was Mr. Grayson who had once said, "Scrub hard, black girl. Then I'll let you try the leather chair." A comment he likely thought nothing of, but which replayed in Maya's mind like a broken record. That leather chair became symbolic of everything she felt she couldn't have: a seat at the table, respect, validation. Yet despite the sting of those words, Maya refused to let bitterness consume her entirely. Instead, she channeled her frustrations into small acts of defiance, like making sure the glass doors sparkled brighter than anyone expected, or arranging the magazines in the lobby with military precision. These tiny victories were hers alone. Silent reminders that even if the world dismissed her, she still held power over something, no matter how insignificant it might seem. As weeks turned into months, Maya began noticing patterns within the building. Same executives arriving late, yet leaving early. The interns scurrying around with coffee cups, balanced precariously in their hands. The security guards exchanging knowing glances whenever someone important strode by. There was a rhythm to this place, almost mechanical in nature. And Maya found herself growing increasingly curious about the lives unfolding behind closed doors. One evening, while mopping the hallway near the executive offices, she overheard fragments of a heated conversation coming from Mr. Grayson's room. His voice was low but urgent, punctuated by sharp breaths and the occasional slam of his palm against what sounded like wood. Unable to resist, Maya paused, leaning slightly closer under the guise of adjusting the mop bucket. Through the crack beneath the door, she caught snippets of phrases like embezzlement, cover-up, and if this gets out. Her stomach churned as realization dawned: whatever scandal brewing inside that office was big enough to bring down not just one person, but potentially the entire firm. For a moment, fear gripped her chest, urging her to walk away and pretend she'd never heard anything. After all, sticking her nose where it didn't belong would only invite trouble, especially for someone in her position. But another part of her, a braver, angrier part, felt a flicker of hope ignite deep within. If she played her cards right, maybe, just maybe, this could be her chance to prove herself, to step out of the shadows and claim the recognition she deserved. Over the next few days, Maya observed Mr. Grayson more closely than ever before. She noticed how his usual composure faltered now and then, replaced by fleeting expressions of anxiety whenever certain colleagues approached him. He stayed late, most nights, often pacing in front of his desk, while clutching documents tightly in his hands. Once, she saw him throw a folder onto the floor in frustration, scattering papers everywhere. When he left momentarily to fetch something from the printer, Maya hesitated for only a second before stepping into the forbidden territory of his office. Her heart pounded wildly as she bent down to pick up the scattered sheets, careful not to disturb anything else. As she gathered them, her eyes skimmed over numbers, names, and dates that made little sense individually but painted a troubling picture collectively. Tucked between the pages was a crumpled note scribbled hastily in pen. "We need to fix this before Friday." Maya's hands trembled as she realized the gravity of what she held in her grasp. This wasn't just some petty office drama, it was evidence of corruption at the highest level, the kind that could ruin careers and destroy reputations. She slipped the note into her pocket, knowing full well the risks involved, but unable to ignore the opportunity staring her in the face. That night, lying awake in bed, Maya wrestled with conflicting emotions. On one hand, exposing the truth could grant her the justice she craved, perhaps even earning her a promotion or commendation for bravery. On the other hand, blowing the whistle meant putting herself directly in harm's way, risking retaliation from powerful individuals who wouldn't hesitate to silence her permanently. The weight of responsibility pressed heavily upon her shoulders. Yet, amidst the turmoil, a newfound determination began to take root. If nothing else, this was her chance to rewrite her story, to show the world and herself that she was more than just a faceless cleaner scrubbing floors others walked on. By morning, Maya had made up her mind. She would gather as much information as possible, documenting every suspicious detail and storing it safely until she figured out the best course of action. It wouldn't be easy, and the journey ahead promised danger and uncertainty. But for the first time in years, Maya felt alive with purpose. Little did she know, however, that her decision would set off a chain reaction of events far beyond anything she could have anticipated, drawing her deeper into a web of secrets and lies that threatened to unravel not only her own life, but also those of everyone connected to Sterling and Co. The following week unfolded in a blur of clandestine observations and calculated moves. Maya continued her duties as usual, maintaining her routine to avoid suspicion, but her mind raced constantly, piecing together clues and strategizing her next steps. Each trip to Mr. Grayson's office felt like walking a tightrope, balancing caution with curiosity. She memorized schedules, noting when he left for meetings or stepped out for lunch, using those brief windows to sneak peeks at his files or listen in on phone calls. Slowly but surely, she uncovered bits of information that painted a clearer picture of the conspiracy unfolding within the firm. Names surfaced repeatedly, some familiar faces from the upper management team, others belonging to external parties whose involvement hinted at a larger network of deceit. Among these revelations, one name stood out: Evelyn Hart, a senior partner, rumored to be nearing retirement. According to whispered conversations, Evelyn had stumbled upon discrepancies in quarterly reports months earlier and had quietly begun investigating on her own. Unfortunately, her inquiries hadn't gone unnoticed, and rumors suggested she was being pressured to drop the matter altogether. Intrigued and alarmed by this development, Maya decided to seek Evelyn out, hoping to find an ally in her quest for truth. Their first encounter happened purely by chance, or so it seemed. While dusting shelves in the conference room, Maya accidentally knocked over a stack of folders, sending papers fluttering to the floor. Evelyn, passing by at that exact moment, stopped to help her pick them up. Up close, Maya noticed the weariness etched into Evelyn's features, a stark contrast to her otherwise composed demeanor. They exchanged polite smiles and introductions, but as Evelyn handed back the last document, her gaze lingered on Maya for a fraction longer than necessary. "You're new here, aren't you?" she asked softly, her tone carrying a hint of warmth that surprised Maya. Nodding, Maya replied, "Yes, ma'am. Just started a few months ago." Evelyn studied her for another beat before saying, "Well, thank you for keeping things tidy. It makes a difference." And with that, she walked away, leaving Maya wondering if the interaction had been mere coincidence or something more deliberate. Either way, it planted a seed of possibility in Maya's mind, a potential partnership waiting to bloom if nurtured carefully. Over the next several days, Maya found excuses to cross paths with Evelyn, striking up casual conversations during breaks or lingering near areas where Evelyn tended to spend time. Though hesitant at first, Evelyn eventually warmed to Maya's genuine interest and keen observations. Sensing a shared mission between them, Evelyn confided in Maya about her suspicions regarding the financial irregularities plaguing the firm. Together, they devised a plan to expose the culprits, combining Evelyn's insider knowledge with Maya's stealthy reconnaissance skills. What neither of them anticipated, however, was the extent to which their adversaries would go to protect their secrets. Late one evening, as Maya prepared to leave the building, she spotted two unfamiliar men loitering near the entrance, their hushed tones and furtive glances setting off alarm bells in her head. Ducking behind a potted plant, she watched as they exchanged envelopes stuffed with cash before disappearing into the night. Panic surged through her veins. Someone knew they were onto something, and danger lurked closer than ever before. Clutching her phone tightly, Maya debated whether to call Evelyn immediately or wait until she reached safety. Before she could decide, the sound of approaching footsteps froze her in place. Turning slowly, she came face to face with none other than Mr. Grayson himself, his expression unreadable yet undeniably menacing. "Maya," he said calmly, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of irritation. "What are you still doing here?" Swallowing hard, Maya forced a smile and replied, "Just finishing up, sir. Making sure everything's spotless for tomorrow." For a long moment, he stared at her, as if weighing his options, before finally nodding curtly and walking away. Breathing a sigh of relief, Maya hurried outside, her thoughts racing faster than her feet. She realized then that the game had changed. They weren't just fighting for justice anymore. They were fighting for survival. Maya's newfound alliance with Evelyn brought both hope and fear into her life, a delicate balance that kept her constantly on edge. While having someone to share the burden with lightened her load, it also amplified the stakes now. She wasn't just risking herself, but dragging another person into the dangerous web she'd uncovered. Every day felt like walking a tightrope stretched over an abyss, each step fraught with uncertainty. Her mind became a battleground of conflicting emotions: guilt for involving Evelyn, determination to see this through, and an ever-present undercurrent of dread that gnawed at her insides. At night, sleep eluded her, as scenarios played out in vivid detail, behind closed eyelids. What if they were caught? What if their plan failed? Worse still, what if someone got hurt because of her? Yet during the day, Maya masked these fears behind a stoic exterior, forcing herself to focus on the task at hand. She began documenting everything meticulously, snapping photos of suspicious documents when no one was looking, and jotting down notes in shorthand. So cryptic even, she struggled to decipher them later. The weight of secrecy pressed heavily on her chest, making every interaction feel loaded with hidden meaning. A casual greeting from Mr. Grayson sent her pulse racing, while a lingering glance from one of the security guards left her wondering if he suspected something. Even Evelyn's calm demeanor sometimes unnerved her. Though the older woman exuded confidence, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that she too might be harboring doubts about whether they could pull this off. Despite these anxieties, there were moments when Maya allowed herself to dream of what victory might look like: a promotion, recognition, maybe even a chance to sit in that leather chair without being mocked. But those fantasies were fleeting, chased away by harsh reminders of reality. One such reminder came when Marcus called her late one evening, his voice trembling as he confessed he'd received an anonymous letter warning him to tell your sister to stop poking around. Fear gripped Maya like icy fingers, squeezing until she could barely breathe. How had anyone traced her actions back to her brother? Was she really naive enough to think she could protect him by keeping him in the dark? That night, she sat alone in her dimly lit apartment, staring at the crumpled note clutched in her hand, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. For the first time since starting this journey, she questioned whether it was worth it. Could she sacrifice her family's safety for the sake of justice? And yet, abandoning the mission now seemed impossible, not after coming this far. Not after putting Evelyn in harm's way. As days turned into weeks, the pressure mounted, manifesting in small cracks in Maya's carefully constructed facade. She snapped at co-workers over trivial matters, lost track of time while lost in thought, and found herself retreating further into solitude outside of work. Friends noticed the change but chalked it up to stress, unaware of the storm raging beneath the surface. Only Evelyn saw through the cracks, gently reminding Maya that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. Their conversations provided solace, brief respites from the chaos swirling around them. But even Evelyn's reassurances couldn't fully quell Maya's inner turmoil. Meanwhile, the conspiracy at Sterling & Co. grew more complex with each passing day. New players emerged, old alliances shifted, and the lines between friend and foe blurred dangerously. Maya discovered that some of the junior staff members were unwitting pawns in the scheme, coerced into falsifying records or signing off on dubious transactions under threat of termination. Others, however, appeared complicit, willingly turning a blind eye in exchange for promotions or bonuses. Each revelation added layers to the puzzle, complicating their strategy and testing Maya's resolve. There were mornings when she woke up questioning whether exposing the truth would make any difference at all. If the system was so corrupt, did it even deserve saving? These thoughts haunted her, whispering insidious doubts that threatened to unravel everything she'd worked toward. Still, Maya pushed forward, driven by a mix of stubbornness and desperation. She convinced herself that giving up would mean letting down not only Evelyn and Marcus, but also every other person who'd been wronged by the very institution she sought to dismantle. And so, she continued gathering evidence, piecing together fragments of information, like a mosaic slowly taking shape. Her greatest challenge came when she realized she needed access to Mr. Grayson's personal laptop, a device rumored to contain incriminating emails and financial records. Breaking into his office undetected seemed impossible, especially given the heightened security measures implemented recently. Yet the thought of leaving such crucial evidence untouched filled her with frustration and helplessness. It was Evelyn who suggested a bold plan, posing as IT support to gain entry. Though terrified at the prospect of getting caught, Maya agreed, knowing it was their best shot. On the appointed evening, dressed in borrowed attire, complete with a fake ID badge, Maya entered the building with bated breath. The corridors felt eerily silent, every sound magnified tenfold. The squeak of her shoes against the polished floor, the hum of fluorescent lights overhead, the distant echo of voices from somewhere deeper inside. Her heart thudded wildly as she approached Mr. Grayson's office, fumbling with the lock until it clicked open. Inside, the air smelled faintly of cologne and stale coffee, the desk cluttered with papers and folders. Spotting the laptop, she moved quickly, inserting a USB drive, preloaded with software designed to extract data without leaving traces. Just as the transfer neared completion, footsteps echoed outside the door, growing louder with each second. Panic surged through her veins as she frantically ejected the drive and slipped it into her pocket. With no time to spare, she ducked behind the desk, holding her breath as the door creaked open. Peering through the narrow gap between the desk and the wall, Maya watched as Mr. Grayson stepped inside, muttering to himself about forgotten files. He paused near the doorway, scanning the room before heading straight for the desk. Time slowed to a crawl as Maya braced herself for discovery, her mind racing through potential explanations should he find her. But fate intervened, or perhaps sheer luck, as his phone rang, pulling his attention away. Answering the call, he turned and walked back out, leaving Maya trembling but alive. Once sure he was gone, she bolted from the office, heart pounding like a drum as she fled the building. Outside, the cool night air hit her face, and for a moment, she allowed herself to believe they might actually succeed. Little did she know, the hardest part was yet to come. The aftermath of the break-in left Maya reeling, her nerves frayed like threads pulled too tight. Though they now possessed critical evidence, the risk of exposure loomed larger than ever. Every email notification, every knock on her apartment door, every unfamiliar face in the hallway triggered a fresh wave of paranoia. She started carrying pepper spray in her bag, avoided taking the same route home twice in a row, and double-checked locks obsessively before going to bed. Sleep became a luxury rather than a necessity, stolen in short bursts whenever exhaustion overwhelmed her. During the day, she oscillated between hypervigilance and numbing detachment, unsure which state was more exhausting. Evelyn noticed the toll it was taking and urged Maya to take breaks, reminding her that burning out wouldn't help anyone. But rest felt like a betrayal of sorts, as though pausing even briefly meant conceding defeat. Instead, Maya threw herself into analyzing the data retrieved from Mr. Grayson's laptop, poring over spreadsheets and emails late into the night. Patterns began to emerge, connecting dots she hadn't seen before. Certain transactions linked directly to offshore accounts tied to high-ranking officials within the firm, while others hinted at illegal partnerships with external entities. Names surfaced repeatedly, forming a tangled network of corruption that reached far beyond Sterling and Co.'s walls. Each discovery fueled her anger, reigniting the fire that had initially driven her to act. Yet alongside the rage simmered a profound sadness for the lives ruined, the trust broken, the ideals betrayed. Maya often wondered how people could justify such wrongdoing, convincing themselves it was worth the cost. Did they truly believe they were untouchable, or had they simply stopped caring? These questions haunted her, adding depth to her understanding of the enemy she faced. Meanwhile, tensions within the firm escalated, creating an atmosphere thick with suspicion and unease. Whispers circulated among employees, rumors of impending layoffs and restructuring sending waves of anxiety rippling through the ranks. Some blamed Maya indirectly, accusing her of stirring trouble by asking too many questions or lingering too long in restricted areas. Co-workers who once ignored her now eyed her warily, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. Even Marcus distanced himself slightly, sensing her preoccupation without fully grasping its cause. Isolation wrapped itself around Maya like a suffocating blanket, squeezing tighter with each passing day. Yet amidst the loneliness, occasional glimmers of humanity pierced through, like the elderly janitor who shared stories of his own struggles during lunch breaks. or the receptionist who slipped her encouraging notes tucked inside empty envelopes. These small acts of kindness reminded her why she fought, grounding her in a world that often felt chaotic and cruel. As the deadline for exposing the truth drew nearer, Maya wrestled with decisions that carried monumental consequences. Should they go public immediately, risking backlash, but ensuring transparency? Or should they approach authorities discreetly, gambling on their willingness to investigate thoroughly? Each option carried risks and rewards, forcing Maya to weigh morality against practicality. Ultimately, she chose to consult Evelyn, trusting her judgment above all else. Together, they crafted a detailed report summarizing their findings, complete with supporting evidence and recommendations for action. Handing it off to a trusted journalist felt like releasing a bird from captivity, freeing yet terrifying, uncertain whether it would soar or plummet. Days passed in agonizing suspense, waiting for the story to break. When it finally did, the explosion rocked not just Sterling and Co., but the entire industry. Headlines blared accusations of fraud, embezzlement, and cover-ups, naming names and demanding accountability. Chaos erupted within the firm as executives scrambled to defend themselves, pointing fingers and shifting blame. Amidst the turmoil, Maya stood quietly in the background, watching as the house of cards she'd helped topple crumbled piece by piece. Victory tasted bittersweet, mingling triumph with sorrow. Lives would be ruined, reputations tarnished, and scars left behind long after the dust settled. But for the first time in years, Maya felt seen not as a faceless cleaner scrubbing floors, but as a woman brave enough to stand up for what was right. The morning after the expos hit the headlines, Sterling and Co. became a war zone. Employees arrived to find news vans parked outside, reporters shoving microphones toward anyone willing to speak, and security guards struggling to maintain order. At the entrance, inside, chaos reigned. Supreme executives barricaded themselves in conference rooms. Phones rang incessantly, and whispers of lawsuits and arrests filled the air like static electricity. For Maya, the day began with an eerie sense of calm that quickly gave way to panic. As she stepped off the bus and approached the building, her stomach churned at the sight of flashing cameras and angry protesters holding signs that read "Corporate corruption must end." Her heart pounded as she navigated through the crowd, avoiding eye contact but feeling the weight of stares boring into her back. Once inside, the atmosphere was no less suffocating. The once pristine lobby now buzzed with tension. Employees huddled in corners exchanging frantic updates while others frantically packed their belongings, preparing for the worst. Maya's presence seemed to draw more attention than usual. Some shot her sympathetic glances, others glared accusingly, and a few even muttered under their breath about betrayal. She tried to ignore them, focusing instead on maintaining her composure, but the cracks were beginning to show. Her hands trembled as she unlocked the janitorial closet, and beads of sweat formed on her forehead, despite the cool air conditioning. It wasn't until she reached her makeshift workspace, a corner near the supply room, that the first real sign of resistance appeared. Mr. Grayson himself emerged from the elevator, his face pale but determined, flanked by two burly men who looked more like bodyguards than colleagues. He scanned the area with cold eyes before locking onto Maya, his jaw tightening visibly. Without a word, he gestured for her to follow him. And though every fiber of her being screamed to refuse, she obeyed, knowing defiance would only escalate things further. They entered an empty conference room, the door clicking shut behind them with an ominous finality. For several seconds, Mr. Grayson simply stared at her, his expression unreadable, yet undeniably menacing. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and measured, but laced with venom. "You think you're clever, don't you?" he said, pacing slowly around the table, playing hero, exposing secrets that don't belong to you. "Did you really believe you could get away with it?" Maya swallowed hard, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "I didn't do anything wrong," she replied, her voice steady, despite the storm raging inside her. "What I did was right. People deserve to know the truth." His lips curled into a humorless smile. "Right or wrong doesn't matter here, Maya. All that matters is power. And you've just made enemies far more dangerous than you can imagine." Before she could respond, one of the men handed him a folder, which he flipped open to reveal photos of Marcus leaving campus, entering their apartment building, sitting at a cafe. Cold dread washed over her as realization dawned. They'd been watching him all along. "If you value your brother's safety," Mr. Grayson continued, leaning closer, "you'll retract everything. Call it a mistake. Blame it on misinformation, whatever it takes. Otherwise, you let the threat hang in the air, unspoken but unmistakable. Maya felt her knees weaken, nausea rising in her throat. How had she not seen this coming? In her quest for justice, she'd underestimated the lengths these people would go to protect themselves. Yet, even as fear clawed at her chest, something else stirred within her, a spark of defiance fueled by anger and desperation. She straightened, her posture meeting his icy glare head-on. "You can threaten me all you want," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. "But the truth is out there now. You can't erase it, no matter what you do to me or my family." Mr. Grayson's smile faltered momentarily, replaced by a flicker of irritation. Clearly, he hadn't expected such resistance. After a tense pause, he signaled for his men to leave, then leaned against the table, studying her intently. "You're playing a dangerous game, girl," he warned. "One wrong move, and you'll lose everything, including those you love." With that, he turned and exited the room, leaving Maya alone with her racing thoughts. Overwhelmed but unwilling to give up, she called Evelyn immediately, explaining what had happened. Evelyn listened quietly, her tone grave but unwavering. "They'll try to intimidate us, make us doubt ourselves," she said firmly. "But we can't let them win. Not now, not after everything we've risked." Together, they devised a plan to counteract the backlash, reaching out to allies within the media and legal community who might help shield them from retaliation. Meanwhile, Maya took additional precautions, arranging for Marcus to stay with a trusted friend temporarily, and changing her daily routines to avoid predictability. Despite these efforts, the pressure mounted relentlessly. Over the next few days, anonymous threats poured in, emails, texts, even notes slipped under her door, all designed to break her spirit. Some accused her of ruining lives, others promised vengeance, and a few hinted at physical harm. Each message chipped away at her resolve, planting seeds of doubt that sprouted into nightmares. Still, she refused to back down, clinging to the belief that standing firm was the only way forward. A turning point came unexpectedly during a routine cleaning shift. While emptying trash bins in the executive wing, Maya overheard fragments of a conversation between two senior managers discussing contingency plans. One mentioned transferring funds to overseas accounts, while the other suggested silencing key witnesses permanently. Though vague, the implications sent shivers down her spine. Determined to act, she discreetly recorded the exchange, using her phone, careful not to draw attention. Later that evening, she shared the audio with Evelyn, who recognized its potential impact. "This could be exactly what we need to tip the scales in our favor," Evelyn said, her eyes lighting up with cautious optimism. They decided to leak the recording anonymously, hoping it would force authorities to take immediate action. Within hours of its release, the fallout was explosive. Law enforcement launched raids on multiple locations tied to Sterling & Co., seizing documents and freezing assets linked to the implicated individuals. Arrest warrants were issued for several top executives, including Mr. Grayson, whose attempts to flee the country were thwarted at the airport. News outlets hailed the development as a major breakthrough, praising the whistleblowers responsible for bringing justice to light. For Maya, however, relief mingled with lingering unease. While the tide had shifted in their favor, she knew the fight wasn't over, not completely. Powerful enemies remained at large, biding their time and plotting revenge. Yet amidst the uncertainty, a newfound strength blossomed within her. No longer was she merely a cleaner scrubbing floors, or a pawn caught in someone else's game. She was a survivor, a fighter, a woman unafraid to stand up for what was right, even if it meant facing unimaginable challenges along the way. And those scars would remain long after the dust settled. She vowed never to forget the lessons learned, that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. That justice required sacrifice, perseverance, and unwavering faith in the possibility of change. And that sometimes, the smallest voices carried the loudest truths. As weeks passed, the ripple effects of the scandal spread far beyond Sterling & Co., sparking investigations into similar practices across the industry. Employees who had once feared speaking out began stepping forward, sharing their own stories of exploitation and abuse. Public outrage fueled demands for stricter regulations and accountability measures, forcing corporations to rethink their priorities and ethics. Maya found herself thrust into the spotlight, hailed as a symbol of resilience and integrity. Journalists sought interviews, activists invited her to speak at rallies, and strangers approached her with words of gratitude and admiration. At first, the attention overwhelmed her, reminding her of how invisible she'd felt just months prior. But gradually, she embraced her role as a catalyst for change. using her platform to advocate for marginalized workers and push for systemic reforms. Evelyn stood by her side throughout, offering guidance and support whenever needed. Their partnership evolved into a deep friendship built on mutual respect and shared purpose. Together, they launched initiatives aimed at empowering underrepresented voices within corporate environments, ensuring that future generations wouldn't have to endure the same struggles they had faced. Yet even as Maya celebrated victories big and small, she remained vigilant, aware that true progress often required constant vigilance. Threats still lingered on the periphery, reminders of unfinished battles and unresolved tensions. But rather than letting fear dictate her actions, she chose to focus on hope that her efforts might inspire others to challenge injustice wherever they encountered it. That hope sustained her through sleepless nights and uncertain mornings, guiding her steps as she forged ahead into uncharted territory. By the time autumn rolled around, Maya's life bore little resemblance to the one she'd led before uncovering the conspiracy. Gone were the days of invisibility and insignificance. In their place stood a woman transformed by adversity, tempered by resilience, and driven by an unshakable belief in the power of truth. As she walked through the streets of the city she called home, she noticed subtle changes, not just in herself, but in the world around her. Conversations about equity and transparency dominated coffee shop chatter. Social media campaigns amplified marginalized perspectives, and young professionals carried themselves with renewed confidence. Emboldened by the knowledge that change was possible, Maya smiled softly, realizing that perhaps her greatest triumph lay not in dismantling a corrupt system, but in planting seeds of courage and conviction in hearts everywhere. For every person inspired to question authority, demand fairness, or speak their mind, she saw reflections of a journey and a promise that the fight for justice would continue long after her chapter ended. The weeks following the arrests at Sterling & Co. felt like a storm brewing on the horizon, with dark clouds gathering and winds picking up speed. While the public celebrated the takedown of corrupt executives, Maya knew better than to believe the battle was over. The deeper she dug into the fallout, the more she realized that the roots of corruption ran far beyond a single firm. They twisted through industries, institutions, and even government bodies. Every new revelation brought fresh waves of tension, forcing her to confront challenges that tested not just her courage but her very humanity. It started subtly, emails vanishing from her inbox, strange glitches in her phone's security settings, and shadowy figures lingering outside her apartment building late at night. At first, Maya dismissed these incidents as paranoia creeping in, but when Marcus's temporary host reported a break-in attempt, though nothing was stolen, it became clear someone was sending a message. Fear clawed at her chest, urging her to retreat, to disappear into obscurity, and let the world move on without her. But retreating wasn't an option anymore. Too many people were counting on her now, including Evelyn, who had poured her own life savings into funding legal support for whistleblowers across the industry. Together, they agreed to escalate their efforts, knowing full well the risks involved. Their plan was bold, almost reckless, to expose not just Sterling & Co., but the entire network of corruption tied to it. They compiled evidence linking high officials, politicians, and corporate leaders to illegal activities, ranging from money laundering to human trafficking. The stakes had never been higher, and every decision carried the weight of potential catastrophe. The turning point came one rainy evening, when Maya received an anonymous tip directing her to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The message promised proof that would blow the case wide open, but something about it felt off, like bait dangling before prey. Despite Evelyn's warnings to proceed with caution, Maya couldn't ignore the possibility of uncovering critical information. Armed with pepper spray and accompanied by a trusted journalist named Daniel, who had been instrumental in breaking the initial story, she drove to the location under cover of darkness. The warehouse loomed ahead, its broken windows reflecting flashes of lightning like hollow eyes watching her every move. Inside, the air smelled damp and metallic, the silence punctuated only by distant thunderclaps. As they ventured deeper, guided by the dim glow of their flashlights, Maya spotted a folder lying conspicuously on a rusted metal table. Her instincts screamed danger, but curiosity pushed her forward. She reached for the folder, flipping it open to find documents detailing illicit transactions involving some of the most powerful names in the country. Before she could process what she was seeing, the sound of footsteps echoed behind them. Turning sharply, they came face to face with three masked figures wielding crowbars. Panic surged through Maya's veins as she backed away, clutching the folder tightly against her chest. "Drop it," one of them growled, Stepping closer, Daniel stepped in front of her protectively, raising his hands in surrender. "We're leaving," he said calmly, his voice steady despite the fear evident in his eyes. "There's no need for this." But the men weren't interested in negotiation. One lunged toward Daniel, swinging his weapon with brutal force. Chaos erupted as Maya screamed, scrambling to shield herself while trying to keep hold of the folder. Adrenaline kicked in, sharpening her senses as she swung her flashlight at one attacker, momentarily stunning him. Seizing the opportunity, she grabbed Daniel's arm and bolted toward the exit, heart pounding wildly as footsteps pounded after them. Rain lashed at their faces as they burst outside, slipping and sliding in the mud as they ran for the car. Bullets whizzed past their heads, shattering the rear window of Daniel's vehicle as they dove inside. With trembling hands, Maya fumbled with the seatbelt while Daniel gunned the engine, tires skidding before finding traction. They sped away, narrowly avoiding another barrage of gunfire. Breathing heavily, Maya clutched the folder to her chest, tears streaming down her cheeks as reality crashed over her like a tidal wave. This wasn't just about exposing corruption anymore, it was about survival. Back at a safe house arranged by Daniel, they reviewed the contents of the folder, realizing it contained explosive evidence implicating individuals far beyond anyone's expectations. Among them was a senator whose campaign promises had earned him widespread acclaim, a tech billionaire known for philanthropy, and a judge overseeing cases related to corporate misconduct. Exposing them would send shockwaves through society, dismantling systems of power that had operated unchecked for decades. Yet doing so also meant becoming targets of unimaginable retaliation. That night, huddled around a laptop with Evelyn and Daniel, Maya made the hardest decision of her life. They would release the documents incrementally, ensuring maximum impact, while minimizing the risk of being silenced all at once. Each leak would be accompanied by encrypted backups stored in multiple locations, making it nearly impossible to erase the truth entirely. The plan required meticulous coordination, sleepless nights spent strategizing, and sacrifices neither of them had anticipated. For Maya, it meant cutting ties with loved ones temporarily, severing connections that anchored her to normalcy in order to protect them. For Evelyn, it meant risking her career and reputation, stepping fully into the role of whistleblower rather than silent supporter. And for Daniel, it meant jeopardizing his credibility as a journalist, knowing that publishing such sensitive material might label him as reckless or irresponsible. Tensions mounted as the first round of leaks hit the internet, igniting outrage and sparking investigations nationwide. Protesters flooded the streets, demanding accountability and justice. Politicians scrambled to distance themselves from implicated parties, while corporations issued denials riddled with contradictions. Amidst the chaos, Maya faced relentless scrutiny, her motives questioned and character attacked by those desperate to discredit her. Death threats piled up, each one more graphic than the last, yet she refused to back down. Instead, she leaned into the firestorm, speaking out publicly about her journey, sharing stories of others affected by systemic corruption, and calling for unity in the fight for change. The climax unfolded during a televised town hall meeting organized to address growing public unrest. Maya stood alongside Evelyn, Daniel, and other whistleblowers, facing a panel of lawmakers and journalists determined to challenge their credibility. Cameras rolled as accusations flew back and forth, tempers flaring and voices rising until the room seemed ready to combust. When it was Maya's turn to speak, she took a deep breath, steadying herself before addressing the crowd. "This isn't about me," she began, her voice strong despite the tremor beneath it. "It's about every person who's ever felt powerless, invisible, or silenced because they dared to question authority. We've uncovered truths that some would prefer remain buried, but we won't stop fighting until justice is served not just for ourselves, but for everyone who deserves a fair chance in this world." Her words resonated deeply, earning applause from supporters and quiet nods of respect, even from skeptics. In that moment, Maya transformed from a reluctant hero into a symbol of resilience, embodying the spirit of defiance needed to dismantle entrenched systems of oppression. But victory came at a cost. Days later, armed agents raided the safe house, arresting Evelyn on trumped-up charges designed to silence her permanently. Maya watched helplessly as her mentor was dragged away, vowing to continue the fight in her honor. Exhaustion weighed heavily on her shoulders, yet she pressed on, driven by the knowledge that giving up meant betraying everything they'd worked for. Together with Daniel, she orchestrated the final phase of their plan, releasing the remaining evidence in a coordinated global effort that left no room for denial or evasion. As dawn broke over the city, Maya stood on a rooftop overlooking the skyline, tears streaming down her face. Below, crowds gathered in celebration, waving banners and chanting slogans calling for reform. The road ahead remained uncertain, fraught with obstacles yet unseen. But for the first time in months, she allowed herself to feel hope, a fragile, flickering light guiding her through the darkness. And those scars would linger long after the dust settled. She knew one thing for certain: she had faced her fears head-on, and emerged stronger, ready to build a future where no one would ever have to scrub floors to earn a place at the table. The aftermath of the town hall marked a pivotal shift, not just for Maya, but for society as a whole. Public pressure forced authorities to act swiftly, launching investigations into every name implicated in the leaks. Arrests followed in rapid succession, toppling dominoes that stretched across industries and continents. High-profile resignations dominated headlines, while protests demanding systemic reform spread like wildfire. Yet amidst the triumph, Maya grappled with the personal toll of her choices. Sleep eluded her, haunted by memories of close calls and sacrifices made along the way. Friends distanced themselves, wary of association with someone thrust into the eye of a political hurricane. Even Marcus struggled to reconcile the sister he once knew with the fearless activist, standing firm against overwhelming odds. Loneliness gnawed at her, threatening to erode the resolve that had carried her this far. Still, she found solace in unexpected places, in messages of gratitude from strangers inspired by her courage, in quiet moments shared with Daniel as they mapped out next steps, and in the unwavering belief that change was possible if enough people dared to dream it. As weeks turned into months, Maya channeled her energy into advocacy work, traveling across the country to speak at rallies, universities, and community centers. Her speeches emphasized the importance of collective action, urging listeners to recognize their own power to affect change. Slowly but surely, a movement began to take shape, fueled by stories of ordinary people challenging extraordinary injustices. Meanwhile, legal battles raged on, with Evelyn's case becoming a rallying cry for whistleblower protections. Despite mounting evidence against her accusers, freedom remained elusive, leaving Maya torn between guilt and determination. She visited Evelyn whenever permitted, promising to see the fight through to the end. "You've already done more than I ever dreamed possible," Evelyn told her during one visit, her voice weary but proud. "Don't let them win, Maya. Keep pushing forward for all of us." Those words stayed with her, etched into her heart, like armor shielding her from despair. By spring, the landscape had shifted dramatically. New legislation aimed at holding corporations accountable gained traction. Championed by grassroots organizations, Maya helped galvanize former allies within. The media amplified marginalized voices, ensuring that the narrative remained inclusive and intersectional. Even critics softened their stance, acknowledging the undeniable impact of her efforts. Through it all, Maya remained steadfast, refusing to rest until every promise made translated into tangible progress. On the anniversary of the initial expo, she returned to Sterling & Co.'s headquarters, not as a janitor scrubbing floors, but as a guest speaker invited to address employees about ethics and transparency. Walking through the familiar halls, she marveled at how much had changed and how much still needed to. Standing at the podium in the same conference room where Mr. Grayson had once threatened her, she scanned the audience, meeting eyes filled with curiosity, admiration, and skepticism. "Change doesn't happen overnight," she began, her voice steady and clear. "But it starts with a single step: a decision to stand up, speak out, and refuse to accept less than what's right. Today, you have the opportunity to rewrite your story, to create a legacy rooted in integrity rather than greed. Will you rise to the challenge?" Applause erupted, echoing through the space like a testament to how far they'd come and how far they still had to go. As Maya stepped down from the podium, she caught sight of the leather chair Mr. Grayson had mocked her with. For a fleeting moment she considered sitting in it. Instead, she walked away, leaving it empty as a reminder that true power lay not in titles or possessions, but in the courage to fight for justice. The resolution of Maya's journey arrived not with a single triumphant moment, but as a series of small victories, each one weaving together to form a tapestry of change that stretched far beyond her wildest dreams. By summer, the ripple effects of her actions had transformed not just Sterling & Co., but entire industries and communities. Lawsuits toppled corrupt leaders, investigations exposed hidden networks of exploitation, and public outcry forced corporations to adopt stricter ethical standards. Yet for all the external progress, the most profound transformation occurred within Maya herself, a metamorphosis, born from resilience, sacrifice, and an unyielding belief in the possibility of a better world. As she stood on the steps of City Hall one sunny afternoon, addressing a crowd gathered to celebrate new whistleblower protection laws, Maya felt a strange mix of pride and humility. Gone was the timid young woman who once scrubbed floors in silence. In her place stood someone unafraid to use her voice, even when it trembled under the weight of fear. Her words carried strength, now, resonating with those who had walked paths similar to hers, people who had been told they didn't matter, only to discover their worth through acts of courage. After the rally, reporters swarmed her, asking about her plans for the future, but Maya simply smiled and said, "This isn't my fight alone anymore. It belongs to everyone willing to stand up and demand justice." Those words echoed in her mind long after the cameras stopped rolling, reminding her of how much she'd grown since that fateful evening she overheard Mr. Grayson's whispered threats. The scars of her journey remained visible, not just in the dark circles beneath her eyes or the faint tremor in her hands, but in the memories etched into her soul. She still woke some nights drenched in sweat, reliving moments of terror when bullets flew or masked figures closed in. But instead of letting those memories paralyze her, she channeled them into purpose, using her experiences to fuel advocacy work aimed at protecting others facing similar dangers. With Daniel's help, she launched a foundation dedicated to supporting whistleblowers, offering legal aid, relocation services, and mental health resources to those brave enough to challenge corruption. Evelyn's eventual release from prison became a cornerstone of this mission. Exonerated thanks to overwhelming evidence proving her innocence, she emerged stronger than ever, determined to continue fighting alongside Maya. Their partnership evolved into something akin to family, bound not by blood but by shared struggles and triumphs. Together, they traveled across the country, speaking at conferences, mentoring activists, and pushing for systemic reforms that addressed root causes rather than surface-level symptoms. Through it all, Maya found unexpected joy in the connections she forged, whether it was comforting a scared intern, hesitant to report misconduct, or sharing laughter with fellow advocates during late-night strategy sessions. These moments reminded her that while the fight was daunting, it wasn't lonely. Alongside newfound allies, she built networks of support that spanned generations, backgrounds, and beliefs, united by a common goal: to create a world where truth mattered more than power. Marcus played a vital role in this chapter of her life. Once distant and unsure of his sister's choices, he grew fiercely proud of her, often joining her at events to share his perspective as a young person inspired by her example. Together, they worked on initiatives targeting students, encouraging them to question authority respectfully and seek justice fearlessly. Watching him embrace activism filled Maya with a sense of fulfillment she hadn't known she craved, a reminder that her sacrifices weren't made in vain. As months turned into years, Maya's influence expanded globally, earning recognition from organizations advocating human rights and transparency. Awards lined shelves in her modest apartment, though she rarely glanced at them, preferring instead to focus on tangible impacts. Fewer workers exploited, more voices heard, greater accountability demanded. Even so, accolades couldn't shield her from lingering challenges. Powerful enemies still lurked in shadows, plotting revenge or seeking loopholes to regain control. Threats persisted, forcing her to remain vigilant, but they no longer held the same power to intimidate. Instead, they served as reminders of why her work mattered on, why giving up was never an option. One crisp autumn morning, Maya returned to the rooftop, where she'd once watched crowds celebrate early victories. This time, she came alone, carrying nothing but a notebook and pen. Sitting cross-legged amidst fallen leaves, she gazed out at the skyline, reflecting on how far she'd come. The leather chair no longer symbolized exclusion or mockery. Instead, it represented perseverance, the countless hours spent proving her worth despite doubters' sneers. In her mind, she revisited pivotal moments, confronting Mr. Grayson, fleeing the warehouse, standing firm against critics at the town hall. Each memory reinforced lessons learned about courage, integrity, and the transformative power of hope. Opening her notebook, she began writing not speeches or strategies, but letters to her younger self. "Dear Maya," she wrote, "I know you feel invisible right now, like your voice doesn't matter, but trust me, it does. Someday, you'll see that even the smallest actions can spark monumental change. Keep going, keep fighting, and never stop believing in yourself." Tears blurred her vision as she penned these words, realizing how desperately she'd needed to hear them back then. Finishing the letter, she tucked it away, vowing to revisit it whenever doubt crept in. Rising to her feet, she took a deep breath, feeling lighter somehow, as if releasing burdens she'd carried for too long. Below, the city buzzed with energy, alive with stories waiting to unfold. For Maya, the journey wasn't over. There would always be battles to fight, injustices to confront, lives to uplift. But for the first time, she embraced uncertainty, not as a source of fear, but as an opportunity for growth. Descending from the rooftop, she stepped onto the street, blending seamlessly into the flow of pedestrians, rushing toward destinations unknown. No longer did she feel like an outsider looking in. She belonged here, part of a collective striving for progress. And though scars remained, they served as testaments to battles won, not trophies of pain, but badges of honor, marking her evolution from cleaner to catalyst. As sunlight filtered through towering buildings, casting golden hues on bustling sidewalks, Maya smiled softly, knowing that true power lay not in titles or possessions, but in the ability to inspire others to dream bigger, fight harder, and believe deeper. The road ahead promised challenges yet unseen, but she faced them with unwavering resolve, ready to build a future where no one would ever have to scrub floors to earn a seat at the table, or prove their humanity to anyone.